Good morning and welcome to the Daily Light Devotion. I hope all of you have had a wonderful Monday and looking forward to today, that is the 26th, 2nd of July. We continue in Acts 13 and Paul's mission to the different cities, right? Today we're going to look at Acts chapter 13, verses 13 to 14 only. And here we see that when God sends us on a mission, right? There are encouraging experiences and there are some painful experiences also in the worldly sense, right? And we see Paul and his companions moving forward in ministry here in these two verses, but not without challenges. One of the key members, John Mark, departs unexpectedly, and yet Paul presses on, arriving at a new city to continue preaching the gospel. And so these two passages remind us that even when the people walk away, God's mission continues. So verse 13 says, John Mark leaves the team. From Paphos, Paul and his companions sailed to Perga in Pamphylia, where John left them to return to Jerusalem. Now, Paul's journey hits kind of a disruption, right? John Mark, who had come along to help, suddenly leaves and goes back home. This could later become a point of conflict between Paul and this would become a later conflict between Paul and Barnabas. And that's why Paul, in the end, Barnabas also, they went their separate ways, right? When we're looking in Acts 15, verses 36 to 39, we'll see that in the coming weeks. So, you know, this tells us that not everyone who starts with us will stay with us in the mission that God has given us, right? But don't let we should let it stop from obeying God. We need to make sure that we are continuing. We need to make sure that we are not emotionally affected and we forget what the mission is, right? Paul here is, his eyes are on Jesus and what God, Jesus has given him as a mission, and he's led by the Holy Spirit, who's the comforter. So I'm sure it was a difficult time for them, right? Because when you look at a team, internally you feel that, hey, we're going to work together. And so it must have been a tough time for them. But verse 14 says, pressing from Perega, they went on to Pisidian Antioch. On the Sabbath, they entered the synagogue and sat down. So, despite the setback, Paul and Barnabas kept going. They arrived in Pisidian Antioch, where they continued their mission of sharing the gospel in the synagogues, right? So they were very focused, they were very single minded about what they wanted to do. They knew what God's mission in their lives were, though John Mark left and went back home, right? And we've got to continue. We've not got to be the John Mark and go back home. Now, there may have been challenges, right? But sometimes what happens, when you build a team, you also have people who are, you know, don't have the same vision as God has given you or are not walking in the same spirit. And that's fine, right? Everyone is in their own journey, right? So, but we need to make sure that we are not the one, we're not the John Marks, right? We don't leave, right? The mission which God has called us, because, we will never be able to fulfill our life's calling or what we've been made for, right? So, what are some of the life applications? Um, we need to focus on who, we don't need to really focus on who we are with, but and we need to let go who's left. Some people may not be ready for the full journey, right? We need to love them, but we don't need their departure to derail our calling or stop us from fulfilling, like I said, the mission that God has given us, right? We need to stay in the mission focused despite any transition, any changes. See, change is something which will happen continuously, right? Changes are a part of life. But the mission that God has called us on continues. It includes unexpected turns, right? But we need to keep our eyes on Jesus and on the mission and led by the Holy Spirit, like I said. And we do not need to be disappointed or feel emotionally, um, you know, bad, right? Finally, our next opportunity is to serve, right? Paul did not dwell on Perega, what happened, right? He looked ahead and the next place God had prepared. And they went and shared the gospel because, one of the criterias of Paul's ministry and his life was living in the joy of the Lord. Like, despite his difficult times, when he was in jail, when he was beaten up, one thing was constant, and that's what the book of Philippians, I'm studying the book of Philippians right now. And he was writing that in the first chapter, he writes, one thing that remained with him throughout was the joy of the Lord. He could rejoice in Jesus anytime. Right? So he did everything based on focusing on Jesus. Because when we focus on Jesus more, we can walk in the joy of the Lord. Right? And that is something which really encourages us to live in that joy, rejoicing the Lord. And that's what the key to Paul was. So I want to encourage you, you know, sometimes there could be abandonment, discouragement in your life when people let you down. But remember, God hasn't left us, right? Jesus is with us. We can rejoice in Jesus. And he still has a purpose, place, and people ahead. So we need to keep on going like Paul, and our next assignment is waiting for us, or the next calling, or the next step of our calling is waiting for us. So I want to encourage you, you know, never be discouraged about situations, and rejoice like Paul is. That's why Paul could shake in the first century. He could shake the world with the gospel. God used him in that way because he was very, very firm and confident about what God wanted to do. And we need to be like him. He's a great example. That's what Paul says, follow my example as I follow Christ, right? So God bless each one of you. Have a wonderful Tuesday. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.